Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the laws of Sukkah and of Sukkahs. Like I said, we're going to do tonight the first half, the laws of Sukkahs, and then next week we'll see if we could do maybe Tuesday night, if that works for everyone, which is on Monday is obviously Yom Kippur, so it'll be Tuesday night. We'll see, we'll touch base then, and maybe we'll do the laws of the Lulav and the Esrog, which is another class for itself. So tonight we'll focus mainly on the Sukkah aspect of Sukkahs. I don't have the Kitzur in front of me, and we're going to do it. We're not going to follow the Kitzur. We're just going to go through some of the general ideas of what makes a kosher Sukkah, some of the more common questions that come up. Like a lot of areas in halacha, some of them are very complex and very detailed, very tedious, specific measurements, etc. So in the laws of Sukkah as well, it can be very complex and a lot to remember. We're not going to go through all the detail, but we're going to try to go through some of the more common questions that come up in regards to the mitzvah of Sukkah. So we'll start with, we know the mitzvah, the Yom Tiv of Sukkot, the 15th day of Tishrei, is a mitzvah to celebrate. The Yom Tiv is to celebrate the exodus of Egypt, the Yetzias Mitzrayim. And one aspect of Yetzias Mitzrayim was that there was the Anane HaKaveh, the clouds of glory that surrounded the Jewish people and protected them. Because of that, to remember this act of kindness from Hashem, Hashem tells us we should sit in a sukkah. We should sit in a sukkah. And it's interesting that the Alter Rebbe writes over here that although every mitzvah is supposed to have the proper kavanah, the proper intent, and understand why you're doing it and what you're doing, but it doesn't mention it specifically by every mitzvah. But with the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah, the Alter Rebbe says that you're supposed to have in mind, you have to have in mind that you're sitting in the sukkah to remember the kindness that Hashem did for us when we left Mitzrayim. That's what we're supposed to have in mind. And the Alter Rebbe says there's something interesting. He doesn't mention this specifically when we make the bracha. You make the blessing of sitting in the sukkah, leishiv sukkah, you should have this in mind. The Alter Rebbe says, when you sit in the sukkah, seemingly the entire time, you're there for an hour, you're there for 3 hours, you should be keeping this in mind the entire time. Now, obviously, it's hard to say for 3-4 hours straight to keep this in mind, but the idea is, this is something that when you start, and this is something that should be in your mind throughout the time that you are sitting in the sukkah. So let's talk a little bit about the laws of building the sukkah, okay? So we're going to kind of jump around. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Let's talk about building the sukkah. So first of all, someone who, for whatever reason, did not get around to build a sukkah before Sukkot. Now they want to build a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. What if someone wants to build a sukkah mobile, right? A sukkah on a truck, right? Everyone remember that we built that one year, right? you have a flatbed, or if you have a pickup truck and you put a little sukkah in the back, you want to build it on Sukkot itself to drive around. The people could, sukkah at your doorstep. People could come and make a bracha in the sukkah. Or maybe if a hurricane came and blew down your sukkah, where you had to take it down before the hurricane, and then you want to rebuild it on Chol HaMoed. So the halacha is that on Chol HaMoed, we are not supposed to do melacha, which is ma'aseh uman, professional. If you need a carpenter, if you need a professional to build your sukkah, then you should not be building your sukkah. It's not about the person. It's the way the sukkah is built. If you're building a really complicated, like a very sophisticated or advanced type of sukkah, if you're building like a whole deck and whatever, right? A whole fancy sukkah, that should not be built on Chol HaMoed. But if it's just a regular sukkah, a couple of walls and nails and put together, then that is allowed to be built on Chol HaMoed. We mentioned the sukkah mobile, which is basically a sukkah on wheels. And there are some questions in halacha whether it's allowed if you're allowed to have a sukkah which is moving, does a sukkah have to be a stable, a steady thing? That's something which is permanent on the ground. If it's something that is kind of on wheels, is it kosher? So first of all, you have to make sure if you're doing a sukkah mobile, and this is something that this is before Yishai moved here a couple of years ago. Before Zalman moved there, so I ran the C teens with the young teens. So we built a sukkah, and I know nothing from building sukkahs and sukkah mobiles. So I built a sukkah on my own by myself on a pickup truck. And what did I use to tie it down to secure it? I used zip ties. I didn't use a thick zip tie. I used the regular thin zip ties, whatever. Zip ties are pretty strong. So I tied it down with zip ties, and we drove around. We drove around the neighborhood, and people came out. I have pictures. It was a great day of Mitzrayim. And then at one point, we were driving. I think it was on William. We were driving over William. If you drive from Veterans to what's this? There's like an overpass. It goes over the I-10. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So as we were coming down, suddenly the whole thing came crashing down. The whole thing. The whole thing was like totally disaster. Avram had to come and rebuild it for us. He did it properly with proper. He secured it properly. So the point is that when you're building a sukkah, one of the things that a sukkah has to be is it has to be strong enough to stand in a ruach mitsuya. Ruach mitsuya means the common wind. So I'm not sure if that means a 10-mile wind, a 20-mile wind, an average wind. We're not talking about a storm wind. We're not talking about 30, 40-mile wind. If it could stand in your average wind that comes on a regular day, if it's strong enough, then it is kosher. So when you're building these sukkah mobiles, it's something that we have to keep in mind. Also, there are those who say that while the sukkah is moving, while it's on wheels, you should not be eating if you don't have to while it's driving. You should let it park, and then you could use it as a kosher sukkah. Okay. Talking about the ruach mitsuya, talking about the sukkah that has to be able to stand in a regular wind, So the halacha is like this. The halacha is like this. Where did I write it down? That the sukkah has to be able to stand within with a in the regular wind. I'm not sure why I don't see where I wrote this. Now this wind, it doesn't necessarily mean that the wind is actually going to blow it down. What it means is that it's going to be moving. If the wall is going to be moving 3 tfachim, right? So 3 tfachim is
15 inches.
It's less than 15 inches. 3 tfachim is about 9.5 or 10 inches.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So if you have a wall that a regular wind comes, a 10, 15-mile wind, and it's going to be shaking about 10 inches, right? 10 inches is not a lot. But if it's going to be shaking 10 inches, then that might be a questionable wall.
Or like if you were to use a canvas or something like that.
Sorry?
If you were to use a canvas,
exactly.
that would breathe with the wind.
Now, it doesn't mean that it could even be in a place. Let's say you have it in an alleyway, or you have it in your yard, and it's right near the wall of the house. Even if it's in a place that wind doesn't actually get there, it makes no difference. It has to be that if wind would get to it, it has to be strong enough. It doesn't mean that there's actually wind there. It just we use it to gauge the strength of the wall. So even if there's no wind coming, or it's in a place where no wind actually has access, but if it's weak enough that it would move 3 tfachim in the wind, then it is not considered a kosher wall. So like David mentioned, the big question is with the cloth sukkahs, right? You can buy it, these comes with a frame, it's a metal frame, and then you just put a cloth on it, right? Whatever it is, it's made out of plastic, out of nylon, what's it called, vinyl, or it's canvas, or whatever the material is. Many times it's kind of very wishy-washy, right? It doesn't really, 10 inches is not a lot for it to move back and forth. So you have to be careful with that. So there are a few suggestions of how to, if you do want to use that type of sukkah, the type of wall, what could you do to strengthen it? So then, the obvious thing is, and I think today many of those frames, they'll have a frame and then they'll have another like bar going in the center, and it's also tied to that bar, so it gives it extra strength. So that could work. But halachically, another interesting thing that you could do is that we'll learn soon that there's a concept in halacha called lavud. Okay, what does lavud mean? Lavud is a concept not only in regards to sukkah, it's in regards to many other halachas as well. And it means that if something is within 3 tfachim from something else, so if it's within 10 inches from each other, we consider it attached. We consider it connected. Okay? So if I have this over here, and I have this over here, and there's less than 10 inches in between, we say that it's like there's actually a solid wall, right, in between. So what could you do? So what some have advised is say like this: take either a plank of wood, or even if it's like a string, but it's really, really tight that it doesn't move even 10 inches, right? Or take even metal or whatever it is, and if you put it across, let's say this is your wall, okay? So this is your frame. This is your frame, okay? So you put bars or strings or wood, right, across, and you do it within each one is within 10 inches of the other, okay? Almost like a fence, but it could be up to 10 inches in between each one, and then we say that because it's within 3 tfachim, it's lavud, it's like connected. And then you put the cloth on top of that, so you have a solid wall, both physically and halachically.
So you have to. So you have to have, in other words, like upright every 10 inches.
Less than 10 inches, yeah. Now the Tzemach Tzedek says that the best thing is to do it to length, top to bottom, upright. However, many others say you can do it also this way. You also do it horizontal, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be vertical. It could be horizontal. So if you do horizontal, but the same idea, the horizontal should be within 10 inches from each other. And the best thing is not to rely only on those bars or whatever we're putting, but also to cover it with something. To also have a material, a cloth over it. So that's the best way to do it.
What about the contact from the ground?
Wait. Now, how? So that is in regards to the strength of the wall. Now, the walls itself. So first of all, the minimum size of the wall, it has to have at least 3 walls. Our custom is in Chabad that we have 4 walls, right? You should try to have all 4 walls. We don't have to have 4 complete walls. 3 walls and a little bit is our custom. So even if you have a sukkah of 3 walls, it's completely kosher. Chabad custom is to add at least something to the 4th wall, even just a little piece of wood or a little something to begin the 4th wall. The walls itself could be built out of anything. It doesn't have to be anything kosher. It could be metal, stone, concrete, wood, plastic. It makes no difference what the wall is made out of. Like I said, as long as it has that strength of the wall, any material is kosher for the wall. The size of the wall, the size of the walls have to be the height, minimum 10 tefachim. Minimum 10 tefachim. Now, what's 10 tefachim? We said every tefach is 8 centimeters, which is, I think, about 3.8 It's like 3 and a 3 and a little bit. I think exactly 3.16 inches. Okay, so we're talking about roughly. We said about 10.
So 31 inches.
So about 31 inches. Yeah, 31 and a half. About 32 inches. You have to round it up. It's about 32 inches of height. No. 10 tfachim. Yeah. About 32 inches of height, which is how many feet? It's about 2.5 feet.
Almost 3, yeah.
Right? Almost 3 feet. Wait, 36 would be, almost 3 feet, which is quite low. It's pretty low, right? For the height of a sukkah. The Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab actually wrote that in things of the Araisa, things that are like biblical, we should try to be machmir, to consider a tefach to be 10 centimeters. I don't have a ruler in front of me. How many inches is 10 centimeters? So 10 centimeters is just less than 4 inches. Just less than 4 inches. So lechatchila, the height of the wall of the sukkah should be 40 inches, 39 or whatever, almost 40 inches. Okay, a little bit more than 3 feet. Okay. Now, in theory, you could build a sukkah of 40 inches. That's a kosher sukkah. Obviously, we don't build, small sukkahs these days. But the reason why it's important to know that is because of another halacha, which is the halacha of gud asik. Okay, this is an interesting halacha. Gud asik means that once you have a kosher size wall, meaning once you have a wall that is 10 tfachim, 40 inches from the ground, lachatchila, 32 is also kosher, right? Either 32 inches or even better, 40 inches. Then we consider the wall that as if it goes up to the heavens. There's an imaginary wall. Once my wall is, this is 40 inches, we consider as if it goes up to the sky, right? Therefore, what I could do is I could build a wall of 10 tvachim. Then I could build a frame, right? And then I could put my schach over here. I don't have to have a solid wall. Especially in New Orleans, where it's very hot and humid during Sukkot, you don't want to have solid walls. You could build just 40 inches high, and then the rest could be open, like a large window, right? It could be open, and then your schach begins on top. Even more so is that you're actually able to combine these two halachas, lavud, which is 3 tvachim is considered attached, and gud asik, which means we consider it up to the sky. And therefore, in theory, I can have a wall that's only 7 tfachim, right? Because if I have a wall that is 7 tfachim, I put it just below 3 tfachim from the ground. So this is the ground. My wall begins within 3 tfachim, within 9, 10 inches, less than 10 inches from the ground. So we consider that lavud, right? That's considered solid. I have 7 tvachim, so it's 10 tvachim altogether from the ground. As long as it's 10 tvachim from the ground, we consider it, the wall goes up to the sky. That makes sense? You got that?
Yeah. What if you were to dig out the ground underneath, so that the ground just under the schach is lowered? So
all these measurements. The measurements of the sukkah is all about it's based on the person within what's the mathematical term for that? It's for the person inside the box, right? We're not measuring the actual walls from the outside. We're measuring the measurements are based on the person being in the sukkah. So if I'm in the sukkah, no matter if the wall if I'm on a porch, right? So if I'm on a porch and the walls go all the way to the ground, it makes no difference. we begin from the floor of the sukkah.
Right.
The floor of the sukkah, that's where we begin 10 tefachim up.
Right. So if a person was in there, if the wall began above his knees, would that not be a kosher sukkah?
Whatever it is, 10 inches. It's 3 tefachim. So it's 3 tefachim from the inside floor of the sukkah. So if I'm standing in the sukkah, that's where we begin. So if I have 9 or 8 inches of space, it's still kosher. Okay. So the Gemara says that if the idea is that you don't want an animal, like a goat, to walk under. So they estimated if it's less than 3 tvachim, less than 10 tvachim, it's still kosher. We say lavud, and therefore it's kosher. So your walls don't have to meet the floor; it has to meet within, I guess, 9 inches or so from the floor, and then as long as it's 40 inches from the ground, we could leave space above that. Now, one caveat, one important thing to remember is that if we are relying on the good asik, we're relying on if we have that space in between, then the schach on top, has to begin exactly on top of that area, of that space, right? I can't have a wall, an imaginary wall all the way here, and then my schach begins over here, right? Mm-hmm. The schach has to be as if there was a wall, it has to meet, right? Mm-hmm. You have the space of 3 tvachim, again, lavud, right? So up to 10 inches. So if it's just a few inches off, it's kosher. But if it's more than 10 inches, you have a space of 3 tvachim, that is not considered schach. So then your wall is not considered a wall of the sukkah because there's no schach next to the wall. You got that? That's something important that people not everyone realizes that if you're making a sukkah with that type of wall, you have to make sure that the schach is that close. And by the way, it's not only if you make even a regular wall, even if you have a full solid wall, when you put schach, you always have to make sure that at least next to the walls, there is within 10 inches, there is schach. Because otherwise, that wall is not considered a wall of the sukkah. We disqualify that wall if there isn't schach within 10 inches from that wall. Yeah, Avram.
Far as your legs coming down to the bottom, in other words, how many legs can you put extra legs rather than the full corners? Or do you have to have a leg every so many feet?
No, however you want to engineer it. As long as it's meaning you can figure out if you have. What are you asking? You asking if the walls don't meet the ground?
No, I'm asking how many feet actually have to touch the ground? Just the full corners?
Nothing has to touch the ground. I mean, obviously it can be hanging in the air, but
you got to stand up some kind of way, right?
That's what I'm saying. There's no halachic requirement of. As I'm saying, obviously. Practically, realistically, it has to be on the ground. But the point is, in theory, if you're able to have it somehow attached from a distance or whatever, I'm saying there's no halacha that the walls have to touch the ground. As long as there's less than 10 inches from the wall, from the bottom of the wall to the ground, it's kosher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and obviously you're saying ground meaning whatever you're standing on, because you could be on the balcony.
Yeah, I say ground. I mean the floor of the sukkah. The floor of the sukkah. Yeah.
Yeah, you could be a balcony of a building, and the ground could be 50 feet below you, but
exactly. Something that I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here and there, but something that not everyone's always pays attention to. That there's a halacha that the sukkah cannot be stolen, right? It doesn't mean to go to Sukkah Depot and steal a sukkah. That's obviously not allowed. But Sukkah Gezula could also mean things that we don't always think about. For example, if you're cutting schach from trees that don't belong to you, you have a neighbor's palm tree. I cut a couple of branches, so I didn't ask him. It might be problematic. You might want to have permission, right? Even if you assume that he doesn't mind, Meaning, even if you assume, of course, he doesn't mind. Look, these are old branches that have to be cut either way, and you know your neighbor, and your neighbor probably does not mind. You still have to ask permission. And of course, when it comes to cutting from the city's property, I'm not saying it's not allowed, but it has to be done in a way where it's kind of clear that that it's fine to do it. That's something to think to consider. Also, the walls of the sukkah also can't be stolen. So if you find this, you're driving through by a construction site or something, you find some planks of wood, you can't just take it, even if you think, it's scrap, it's probably nothing. You got to ask permission. Another thing is probably more practical, happens many times, is the floor of the sukkah, right? Where are you building your sukkah? If it's not on your property, do you have permission to use that area? Is your sukkah maybe halfway on your neighbor's driveway? Maybe they don't mind, but do you know for sure they don't mind? Because if they do mind, it's not a kosher sukkah, right? I take that back. It's a kosher sukkah, but you cannot make a blessing. You cannot make a blessing on that sukkah. You can't make a blessing because the sukkah came to you through doing something forbidden. So if it was done, it's kosher, but we don't make a blessing. Leisha b'sukkah. So I know over here, Nemes had an issue a few years where he built the sukkah in his front driveway, and he built it over the walkway, right? The sidewalk, right?
Right.
And who thinks about that? The sidewalk, right? You park your cars, you block the sidewalk. Who cares, right?
The parish made me get it off. Yeah.
Then someone came and complained. Well, the parish only came because they got a complaint from we're not even sure who that you're blocking the sidewalk. You're blocking the sidewalk, and they had to get permission, and they did that for a few years. They actually got written permission from the parish that they are allowed to put up their sukkah for whatever it is during this time, blocking the sidewalk. If the parish would not let, it's not just whatever issues with this parish. It may be problematic to make a blessing on the sukkah or in the sukkah when it is done, when it's stolen land, when it's built on an area that they have no permission to do so. Generally, in Israel or other places, generally it's accepted today that when you're building a sukkah on public property, in an area where it's not really bothering anyone, you're not blocking traffic. It's like I said, like your sidewalk, or if it's like next to your store, like in an area where like it's not really bothering anyone, and the government, the parish or whatever it is, never makes an issue of it. We consider that's considered kosher. It's fine. But in certain places where maybe they have to hide, and if the parish would see, they would come and make a problem. Then you really got to get permission to use that property before you build your sukkah. Okay. Okay. What am I saying here? Now, talking about the schach, okay? Talking about the schach. So, the walls of the sukkah could be built out of anything. However, the issue becomes
natural, though, right?
No, the walls.
No, the schach on top.
Oh, so the schach. The problem is that the schach, if you have a wall that's not built, that's not made out of something which is kosher for schach, then the schach lechatchila should not be placed on the wall that isn't kosher. So if you have a metal frame, you have plastic, if you have other materials, stone or concrete, cement, that using this as your wall, your wall of your house, brick. So there could be an issue with putting the schach directly on something that is not kosher for schach. It's called a maimid. Maimid, right? Maimid means to hold up. What is holding up the schach? What's holding up the schach should also be something which is kosher for schach. Therefore, if you have a metal frame, you shouldn't put schach directly on the metal frame. You should put a piece of wood or a few pieces of wood, and then put the schach on the wood.
I was noticing that on the on your sukkah at the shul.
Right. So we'll get to the sukkah on the shul in a moment, right? But here I'm talking about even if without the metal planks going by. It's saying even the walls, right? I have walls that are metal. So then I put, let's say this is my wall, right? So this is metal. I put some things of wood.
Rafters.
What?
Rafters.
Rafters, right?
Mhm.
Any size, any big or small, right? A cross, and on that I put my schach. So what's holding up the schach? It's the wood. What's holding the wood? The metal, right? So as long as the metal is not directly holding the schach, called a maimid, dimaimid, right? That's allowed. So if the schach is directly on something which is like metal, then lachatchila we don't do that. If it's on something which is kosher for schach, and that thing is on something which is not kosher for schach, so then it's allowed. Okay? Now, what's important to realize, and this is where I want to get to the sukkah and shul, is that what is considered a maimid? Maimid means something that if you remove it, the thing that it is holding falls. Okay? So this is the wall. This is the metal, the wooden rafter, right? Okay, are you able to see what I'm doing here? And then on these things, I put schach. If I remove this, the schach falls down, right? So what is the real maimid? It's the wood. Therefore, it's kosher. What if I have a metal frame and I put a piece of wood like this on it, right? Just parallel going like this, just covering it, right? Here, is that considered a maimid? If I put my schach on that now, and I remove the wooden piece of wood, I move the piece of wood, it's not going to fall. It's not going to fall. It'll be resting on the metal, the metal frame, right? So that may be problematic because it's not a real maimid. It's just getting in the way of something else. It is not the one that is the thing that is holding the schach, right? It's not supporting the schach because it's really the wall that is supporting the schach, and the wood is just being tucked between the schach and the metal. So therefore, you always have to put the wood in a way where if you take it away, it's going to fall. So if you have a metal frame, put the wood the opposite direction. Put it this way. Okay. So in regards to shul, that you have the metal rafters going by, not necessarily is it okay to do what we always did, to put wood in the 1x2s across and just on top, because if you move those wood, it's still going to sit on the metal, right? But the best thing to do probably would be to put a lot of those 1x2s the opposite direction, enough that the schach on top of that is going to be held primarily by the wood, not the metal. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah. While you're talking about those 2x1s, if you have it going across, like you said, long ways, so that if you did remove it, the schach would fall. Right. But you attached it to the frame with a single nail at the end of each one.
That's okay. That's okay. The maimid, as we call it, the supporting beams could be nailed in. The supporting beams could be nailed in. The schach itself should not be, but the supporting beams could be nailed in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I have on my sukkah. I have the supporting beams, and they're all screwed in, and then on top of that, I put the schach.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is allowed. Now, a maimid is not only something which is supporting from beneath, it could also be something which is supporting from above. So, for example, if you want to save the schach from flying in the wind, and I want to put something on top, the same halacha applies, right? Al-lechatchila, you should not be putting something which is not made out of wood, not something kosher for schach. But you could put a wood. You could put heavy planks of wood on top of your schach if you want to keep it from flying away. In regards to tying the schach, what if you want to tie it down? Zip tie. You can tie your schach so it doesn't fly away. So here it's the same thing. If it's something that without the ties it's not gonna stay, then it's problematic, right? It's a maimid. So you have to use, if you do want to tie, you have to buy some like natural, like I don't know what type of string or rope.
Vanilla.
Yeah, like twine.
Yeah, which is not even woven into a rope. It's like natural, and you can use that to tie. You could take maybe like I could do it for the lulav and Esther. You take one of the branches of the lulav, and you can use that to tie some schach. That's the best way to do it. Again, all these things with hamayimid is all lechatchila. If the sukkah was built, even if it's directly on wood, it is still kosher. It is still kosher. But this is definitely lechatchila. The best way to do it is that to do the supporting the beams or what that's actually supporting the schach should be out of wood and in a way where if it's removed, the schach will not remain not remain up.
So at the shoe, do we need to move those pieces that's on top and run them the other way?
Yeah, or leave them and put new ones. Yeah. I think we should put wood the other way. Yeah.
And just get more of the 1x2s.
Just get more of them. Put them all around. Yeah. Now, in regards to what is kosher schach, okay? What is kosher schach? And again, there's so much. Even with the walls. I mean, you can learn Shulchan Aruch. There's so many cases, and every the size, and it would be it's very complex. A lot of different opinions over here as well. So, if there's any specific non-regular sukkah, definitely we should speak to a rabbi to figure out if it's kosher. Because many times I've been to sukkahs that beautiful sukkah, and I'm looking at them like, I don't know, this is here, this is there. Are the walls the right size? Are they touching? You really have to look at a sukkah and make sure it's kosher. So we're not going through all the halachis. We're just going through some of the general ideas and principles, general rules in the sukkah, and then every specific case really should be looked into specifically. Okay, so in regards to schach, so there are three general rules, criteria of what is kosher for schach. First of all, it has to be something which grows from the ground, right? Which is something like a plant, a branch, wood, right? Something that grows from the ground. It has to be something which is not mekabel tuma, it cannot become tamei, which means it's not a vessel, wasn't made into anything. It's natural. It's just a plank of wood. It's not a wooden ladder. It's not a wooden cup or whatever it is, right? Just pieces of wood, and it has to be disconnected from the ground. If you have a tree but still connected to the ground, and then you cannot use the connected branches of the tree for your schach. Now, anything above the schach is considered covering the sukkah. The sukkah has to be directly under the heaven. Nothing can be in between. So if there is a branch 30 feet up, that's there. Or if there is there's a little rooftop, or if there is a little window unit air conditioner that's 20 feet up, whatever it is, anything above the sukkah, we consider it as if it's on the sukkah. Okay? So if you have a branch 30 feet up, you have to figure out, what if that branch was on the sukkah itself? Would it be kosher? If you have an AC unit, what if that AC unit was directly on the sukkah? Would it be kosher, right? That's how you have to consider it, okay? So what is considered a kosher? Obviously, you want to use branches or whatever it is, right, to cover your sukkah. Now, What if you have something on the sukkah that's not kosher? So this is the general rule. The general rule is like this. If it is less than 3 tefachim, less than the 10 inches, it does not take up space. It's still considered kosher. And you're even allowed to sit beneath it, right? So you want to, if you have a light, right? The light is not 10 inches wide. If it's not 10 inches wide, and you're sitting beneath, you're sitting right under the light. You can still eat there. You can still make a blessing. It's as if you're under schach. As if it's less than 3 tefachim. Even if there's space, there's just open space. I didn't cover every inch of the roof of the ceiling of the sukkah with schach. There's some pockets of empty space. If the pockets are less than 3 tefachim, less than 10 inches, you can even sit under that spot. It's still kosher. Like we said, lavud, right? Less than 3 tefachim, we consider it as if it's attached. So if you have open space less than 3 tefachim, it's attached. If it is something which is right next to the wall, alongside the wall, then we say, interesting halacha, up to 4 amos. Okay? How much is an amma? Amma is about 5 tefachim, right? An amma is...
An amma?
It's about 15, 16 inches. What is it? We say about 18 inches, about 1.5 feet. Okay?
I thought, I thought it was 18 inches.
18 inches. Yeah, it's 18 inches, right?
Yeah.
So 18 inches, we're talking about 18 times 5, which is what, 90, right?
90 inches.
90 inches, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So how many feet is 90 inches? 90 inches.
8'6".
8 point, right? That's quite big, right?
Uh-huh.
90 inches, anything that's 90 inches next to the wall, well, we actually consider it. We consider it part of the wall. We call it a doifin akuma, a slanted wall, right? If I have a wall, this is my wall of my sukkah, but it's slanted, right? So I could be standing over here, but the wall is slanted, so above me, there's wall, right? Doifin akuma, right? So it's still kosher. The wall doesn't have to be exactly straight. The wall could be slanted, right? So if I have a straight wall, but then I have a little rooftop that maybe is 20 feet up, and the little, what's it called, comes out a little bit. So it has some this area is covered. Or if I have an AC unit over here, or if I have anything else, some branches over here, right? So up to 90 inches, we say, you know what? We just consider it like it's part of the wall. It's a slanted wall.
Huh. So perceivably, you can make like a sukkah the same, like a pyramid, diamond shape, presumably.
Yeah. The center has to be 7 tefachim. Has to be, I believe, it has to be 7 tefachim, which is however many inches. That has to be the area of the schach. The minimum size is 7 tefachim by 7 tefachim. But as long as you have 7 by 7 tefachim, yeah, you can be a pyramid. But here's the catch. The catch is that you can only eat under the schach. You can't eat under the wall, right? You have to be under the schach. You can't be under the wall, right?
If the wall's leaning, you can't eat under it.
So the wall's leaning, you can't leave under. So if I have a wall and then I have some branches over here, right? I have a branch, a tree that has some branches going over. So it's still kosher because this area of the branch, we just consider it as part of the wall up to 90 inches inwards, right? However, I can't eat under the wall. So you can't eat under that. So like, I'll give you an example. In my sukkah that I make over here, okay? You ever been to my sukkah?
Yeah.
You haven't been? I invite you to come this year. So basically, I have the sukkah along my house, right? The side of my house.
Right.
So the roof comes out about maybe 2.5 feet. So I'm using the wall of my house for one of my walls. It comes out about 2.5 feet. From there, I put the schach over here, right?
Right.
So I have 3 walls. I actually have 2 walls, and I use 2 walls of my house. But these 2 walls have about 2.5 feet that have no schach. So although the wall is still kosher, we just consider like
you
a
can't eat
slanted
under
wall. but I can't eat under it.
Gotcha.
You got to be careful. You can have it, but you can't eat under it. So if you have a tree that they can't reach, you can't cut, and it's going over within 90 inches. Within 90 inches of the wall, if it's more than 90 inches, we don't consider it part of the wall. But if within 90 inches of the wall, it's still kosher, but you just can't eat under it.
Right. Is that
And
90 inches coming out or not running linear, lengthways?
it's coming out from all four sides.
Okay.
From either side of the wall, it has to be up to 90 inches. Up to 90 inches, we say it's still part of the wall. And it's important sometimes, if you have a sukkah and you know exactly where the branch is, so you know where you're not going to sit. If you have guests, you always have to point out to them, well, by the way, you're sitting, this area is under the tree, so you might want to move over a chair. Sometimes you have, one year, I think Adam Strauss had a really tall branch you couldn't reach. You couldn't cut it before Yom Tov, so he had one area in the sukkah that he always told his guests, oh, this is you're under the branch, you just sit here, So it's a kosher wall. It's a kosher wall, but just you can't eat under it. However, this is something a differentiation to make. The 3 tefachim of ear space, which is allowed, right? That we actually consider as if it's covered. So you are allowed to eat under that, right? So again, to clarify, if I'm sitting under a space that something that's less than 3 tefachim, I have a fan, I have a light, I have something that's there, but it's less than 3 tefachim, or I have open space, I have ear space less than 3 tefachim, I am allowed to sit in that space and make the bracha, because we consider it as if it's complete, as if it's solid, right? As if there's schach over there. So you are allowed to sit there. You are allowed. You are allowed. However, if it's something which is next to the wall and we're considering it part of the wall up to 4 amas, there you cannot eat under it, because if it's there we consider it part of the wall, which you can't eat under the wall. You have to eat under the schach.
Right.
Got that?
So that lamp that we installed under the tent at the shul, if that was something that was in a sukkah, would that be problematic? Something like that?
I'm not sure what the width is, but I probably wouldn't. It's only problematic to eat under it. It's not problematic to have in the sukkah. That light actually came from my sukkah, but it might be problematic to sit under it while you're eating, right? If you have it above the table, then it's fine. That's the issue. Now, what about
What about the fans in the sukkah at the shul?
Again, it's fine to have the fans there. I wouldn't eat directly under the center of the fan, because that's probably, is it 10 by 10, the inches? You have to measure it. If the center of the fan is 10 inches by 10 inches, then I wouldn't eat directly under it.
Yeah, it looks like about that.
But what's it called? The other parts of the fan, the
blades.
The plates, if they're probably not 10 inches, so that would be allowed to you wouldn't be allowed to eat under the rest of the fan. If directly under the fan itself, you should not be eating, and definitely not making a bracha on the sukkah. Now, today many people use bamboo mats. Okay, so before we get to the mats, so understand the background behind the mats. Let's first talk about what the Gemara says about using wood, pieces of wood, plywood, I guess it's called, right?
Right.
So wood, if it's made as a keli, if it's made for something, it's made to be used as is, then it's already a keli, right? It's mekabel tumah, it could become tameh, so it's puzzle. It's not kosher for a schach. But if it's something that's just made to build with, right? It's not made. It's just cut the size, whatever it is. It's just made to use for building, right? So in theory, it should be kosher, right? You can have a thing of wood that is even 4 feet wide and 8 feet tall, right? It's not a keli, right? It's just a thing of wood that you're supposed to build with, right?
Right.
So seemingly that should be kosher for schach. So one issue with it is that schach has to be in a way that has to be more shade than light, more shade than sun, but also it has to be that the rain, it can't be too thick. Rain has to be able to drip through. So if you're going to take a solid piece of wood, obviously rain is not getting through that. But besides that issue, if you have, let's say, a large sukkah and you have a lot of these things of wood, rain can get through in between. The Chachamim said that if you're going to use these materials that are used to actually build rooftops, then people are not going to get very confused. Say, wait, if you're using this for your schach, I might as well eat indoors because it's the same material as my roof, right?
Mhm.
So because of that, they said any piece of wood that is carved, that is cut to size, and it is wider than wider than 4 tefachim. Okay, 4 tefachim. Let's even say the 3, 6. We're talking about 12, about 13 inches, right? If it's 13, if it's more than a foot, let's say, if it's more than a foot wide, more than 12 inches, it's not kosher. We said people are going to get confused. They might think that it's just like building a rooftop. So you shouldn't be using these things of wood, even if you put it on the side. Let's say it's a 12 by 1, so it's 1 inch by 12. So I'm gonna stand it up. That's only 1 inch. So no, just don't use those pieces of wood, right? If it's 4 tefachim, if it's 12 inches, don't use it. The Alter Rebbe says that even less than 4 tefachim, as long as something that's used for building, you should not be using. So even if it's 4 inches, 6 inches, 10 inches, you shouldn't be using this for actual schach. Now, I'm not talking about supporting the schach. Supporting beams is fine, but to use it as my schach, it should not be used. Question is what about the really small ones? Let's say a 1 by 2. Or is it called a 2 by 1? What's it called?
Yeah, 1 by 2.
1 by 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 by 2, it's also a cut to size piece of wood.
Mm-hmm.
But over here, most contemporary rabbis halachic authorities say that it is allowed because really no one builds roofs with 1 by 2s. It's really not used for that type of building.
For sure.
It's like a cheap, I'm not sure exactly what it's used for, but it's really not used to build any real structure long term. I'm saying this is the 1 by 2s. So therefore, most people say it is allowed. Personally, in my sukkah, that's what I use mainly, the 1 by 2s. And either way, if you're going to put a lot of branches on top of that, then for sure it's okay, because then you could always consider these 1 by 2s as a supporting beam, which is for sure okay, because I have enough schach above it. But if I'm not using any green, or if I'm not using a lot of green, I'm just using wood, then you want to make sure that it's not too wide of pieces of wood, because then you get into this complicated topic of not using planks of wood for your schach. Now, this leads us, and by the way, the best thing to do if you want to use pieces of wood is to use like bamboo.
Mm-hmm.
Because bamboo, they are even less than an inch usually. They're kind of, or maybe 1 inch, and it's natural. The main thing is that they're not cut the size, right? It's not like they cut it down they cut the width.
Yeah, it's like completely raw. It's in its raw state.
Totally raw, natural, right? You just cut it, and then you use it, right? I want to thank David publicly for the bamboo you brought me last year. And so if you have bamboo, if you actually have just raw bamboo sticks, that's the best thing to use for, or branches, or any branch. But the bamboo is long, it's straight, pretty much. You can use it, roll it on your sukkah, and it works well.
What about the bamboo? The material you tie it with?
Oh,
if you have some that's tied with manila and you have some that's tied with like a plastic, you have.
So this is So this leads us to the topic of the bamboo mats. Okay, so the bamboo mats is something that is actually fairly recent, maybe 25 years or something, maybe 20 years, 30 years. It's a recent idea that people came up and said, hey, why don't we just use these really, really thin bamboo or something that are actually cut to pieces, right? Slices. Right. And then they're tied together. So perfect, right? So here's some of the issues that may come up. Now today, I'm telling you before I get into it, today there are so many Jewish companies that make these. They have a hechsher from different rabbis, and obviously the rabbis went through exactly all the details, so you could rely on it. I'm just saying, what is some of the background to, or some of the issues that may be with these mats? So first of all, some say that perhaps this may be considered, I mean, if you're tying it together, so for all practical purposes, it's like one piece of wood. If it's one piece of wood, it's more than the 4 tefachim, right? It's more than the 12, 13 inches. It should be possible. It should not be kosher. So however, so the answer to that most of the rabbis will say is that, yeah, but this, it's so thin. Now, the Gemara says 4 tefachim wide, but we just assume we're talking about a general thickness that you're actually going to build with. But if the mat is so thin, you don't build with something so thin. So if it's so thin, we don't consider it like a problem of you might consider it a rooftop or anything like that. So that issue generally is not considered an issue. The issue is 2 issues. One issue is, how is it tied together? Because like you mentioned, tying schach is considered a maimed. It's considered like something supporting it. And lechatchila, we don't use something which is not kosher for schach to support the schach. So if it's being tied with something plastic or thin, thin plastic, whatever it's called, wire, or a thin metal wire or something like that, or like a paper, it's called then like a rope, then it might be problematic. It's not kosher for schach and using it to support it. So what the kosher places, what they do is they actually use either whatever the names of these materials are, but they're natural raw material that are kosher for schach. So even sometimes they actually use thin bamboo strips or something similar, which is actually also kosher for schach. So that is one thing to look out for. Another thing to look out for is, what is the purpose of making these things? If it's a company that's making them to be used as is, as a mat, so that might be problematic, whether it's considered a keli, which could accept tumah, become impure. So the ones that the rabbis give a hechsher to, they look into it, they find out which companies are making it and the purpose. So they all went through it. One year, I think 2 or 3 years ago, the Star K or the CRC, I don't remember who it was, came out with a whole thing about buying these mats from Home Depot and a whole specific way of how to use it. They actually retracted it the next year because it was way too complicated. People weren't using it right. So the best thing is, if you do want to use one of those mats, to use the one that you buy it from the kosher stores that have a hechsher. You obviously pay some more money for it. It's a little more expensive, but it's just a lot easier that way to make sure you're getting the right one and it's kosher. Some people till today don't use mats, and they just use the raw material like 1x2s or regular it's regular bamboo, and you put the green schach on top of that. So that is in regards to that. You have a question?
So in other words, like on the top of the rafters, aluminum rafters, if we put more of the 1x2s running perpendicular across the other way, in other words, would it still be best to have the wood on the runners and just add more of the 1x2s?
I'm not sure. I think, well, I'm not sure if there's any benefit to that. As long as the direct support is coming from the wood, if that wood is on metal, I think it's fine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's in regards to building the sukkah. I know we're a little late, so we're just going to quickly. You know what? I think we'll stop here. Should we stop here? We have a few minutes.
Quick question. So that fourth wall, you said something. Would a little support brace be that considered something for a fourth wall, or no?
Is it 10 tefachim?
What was
The
10 by
wall has to be 40 inches.
40 inches?
You can do like halfway up a few lattice work. Can you do lattice work?
Yeah, I could do a strip of
Coming off the
lattice.
ground.
What?
Coming
I
off
could
the
do it.
ground 40 inches.
You're coming up the ground, you have a wall. Can you do lattice?
You know
Yeah,
how much?
I could do a piece of lattice coming
Yeah, you
down.
know how my sukkah is on the corner?
But David, Ron pointed out, it has to be 40 inches, not lattice hanging from the top. It has to be from the ground.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The lattice has to be strong enough that it's not going to move 10 inches in the wind.
Right. So I can attach a piece of
A little panel.
Yeah. It's like this.
No more than 2 foot.
Yeah, like I could put
Uh-uh.
a little panel right, like if this was the front of my sukkah,
Uh-huh.
right? Yeah, I could put a little
Yeah.
panel of lattice right there at that corner.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have a few minutes or should we stop here?
It's up to you.
Yeah.
So I'll just another quick few minutes. So that's generally about the sukkah, about building the sukkah. Just to talk a little bit about eating in the sukkah. So first of all, the night the mitzvah is to eat in the sukkah, but not only to eat in the sukkah, to spend time in the sukkah, to learn in the sukkah, even to just take a walk or to just spend time in the sukkah.
Mhm.
The bare minimum of the mitzvah of sukkah is to eat the first night of sukkahs in the sukkah. If you want to fast the rest of the holiday, if you want to not eat any bread or mezainis throughout the Yom Tov, there's no mitzvah to eat in the sukkah the rest of sukkahs. The minimum is, the obligation is to eat the first night in the sukkah. Like everything in any mitzvah which is time bound, a positive mitzvah which is time bound, women are not obligated to eat in the sukkah, and therefore, if they do, and they should, then they do make a blessing, leishev basukkah. But if they choose to eat inside, they are allowed to eat indoors. Because of that, this is an important thing to mention, that when you're building the sukkah, when you're building the walls, anyone can build the walls, but when you're putting the schach up, so lichatchila, meaning the best way to do it is that only someone who is obligated in sukkah should be putting the schach on the sukkah. So women or children under bar mitzvah, the lichatchila, we should try to do it that the actual an adult is the one, or a male adult is the one putting the schach on the sukkah. It's not ma'akev, meaning if anyone else put on the sukkah, the schach, even if a non-Jew puts someone who's not even, a non-Jew is also, if they put the schach on the sukkah, it is kosher. What you could do is, afterwards, you could lift, maybe with the stick, you could kind of lift the schach a little bit, 10 inches, and put it back on, like this. You can have your children help you with putting on the schach, and then afterwards you could go and lift it. And like this, it's considered as if you put it on the schach. But either way, going back to making the bracha leishev basukkah, so anyone who eats in the sukkah throughout sukkahs makes a leishev basukkah. You have to eat at least a kabetza, a little bit more than a kabetza. And I don't have the measurements in front of me right now. I think it says about 2 ounces, right? 2 ounces of food, of bread or mezainis, of grain. If we eat that amount in the sukkah, we make a leishev basukkah. If we eat less than that, we don't make a leishev basukkah. And you're actually allowed to eat it outside of the sukkah. So if you're having snacks that are not mezainis, you're having water, if you're drinking water or any drink, if you are eating anything that's not mezainis, anything that's not made out of the 5 grains, you're having a fruit, you're having anything, even if you're eating, you're sitting down and having meat, you're having rice, you're having fish, you do not have to eat it in the sukkah. Our custom, the Chabad custom, is that we try to eat everything in the sukkah, even drinking a cup of water, only in the sukkah. For a different time, we can talk about the reasons for this, and there are some beautiful stories about this. But we try to eat everything, even while it's raining, which technically when it's raining, because there is some pain, there's some tsar, that you're uncomfortable, there's no obligation to eat in the sukkah. The Chabad minhag is to eat always in the sukkah, eat and drink anything. The bracha of leisha basukah is only made if you're eating a kabetza, at least a kabetza of grain in the sukkah. When you drink wine, even though wine is considered like something more special, chashuv, we also do not make a leisha basukah for wine. If you're going there just to have a cup of wine, you do not make a leisha basukah. However, the only time that we do is havdalah.
Mm-hmm.
Making havdalah in the sukkah.
And kiddush, right? Kiddush
drinking
too.
the wine because it's, well, kiddush you also gonna have a whole meal, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But you're right, also kiddush. But kiddush also comes with eating afterwards. So you're right.
Yeah.
But havdalah, you're making havdalah, then you're going into the house. You're not eating anything.
Right.
But because havdalah is a bracha, something important, something special, so we do make a bracha leisha basukah when we make havdalah. Our minhag is that while we make the bracha leisha basukah, we take a quick glance at the schach itself.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us, or if any of you are planning on making a cover to the sukkah, obviously always make sure that when you're making the bracha, that it's obviously uncovered before you make the bracha leishev basukah. Once you make the bracha, you're having a meal. Let's say you make kiddush, or you're having some bread. You make the bracha leishev basukah before you eat. You don't have to make it again for every food that you're going to eat. It covers the entire meal. Like hamaitzi, right? You make it once, it covers the whole meal. You make the bracha leisha b'sukkah, it covers the meal. In fact, even if you're going in and out of the sukkah, it's all covered. As long as there isn't a long stretch of interruption of being in the sukkah. You're out for a few hours, then you come back, then you got to make a new leisha b'sukkah. But if you're in and out, even within an hour, and you're just going back to eat something else, you do not have to make another leisha b'sukkah. However, that's only if you're in the same sukkah. If you go from sukkah to sukkah, I make a leisha b'sukkah, my sukkah, I have my meal, then I go over to Avram's house to have a little farbrengen. I got to make another bracha, leisha b'sukkah. So the leisha b'sukkah only that covers your entire meal, or even between meals, only to the same sukkah. If you go from sukkah to sukkah, then you have to make another bracha, leisha b'sukkah. If you forgot to make a bracha before you ate, you can make a bracha during the meal. Oh, I forgot to make a bracha leisha b'sukkah in the middle of eating, make the bracha now. In fact, even after you finish eating, and even if you benched already, and they say, wait, I didn't make a leisha b'sukkah when I started the meal. So as long as you're still in the sukkah, you haven't left the sukkah, you're allowed to make the bracha then. Why? Because even sitting in the sukkah is part of the mitzvah. So even though we don't make a bracha only if I'm just coming to spend time in the sukkah without eating, I don't make a bracha. But if I ate already and I'm still in the sukkah, as long as I'm still there, I'm still doing the mitzvah. I'm still doing the mitzvah. I am able to eat in the sukkah.
Is your parents coming this year?
My parents are not coming this year.
Yeah.
And I was hoping some of my siblings will come, but not necessarily. We'll see. We'll see who ends up coming. And so that's basically about Sukkah. Next week, God willing, we'll discuss the laws of the lulav and the esrog, what makes it kosher and how to, all that. We'll discuss next week. I also want to say, I want to give everyone a personal invitation that I am, God willing, flying to New York on Wednesday this week. I'm flying in and out to go to the Oihel, as it is the minhag that the truth is the minhag is to go before Rosh Hashanah, to go to the Oihel to daven for the new year. I wasn't able to go before Rosh Hashanah, so I'm going before Yom Kippur. I'm flying in and out same day, leaving Wednesday morning. I'll get to the Oihel about 12:30, and then I'll be there for a few hours, and then I'm not going to Crown Heights. I'm just staying at the Oihel, and then I'm taking a 6:30 flight back. I'm going to stop over in Atlanta. I'll be back here later that night. So it's a one-day trip in and out to be by the Oihel. We'll daven, we'll learn. We'll be there for a few hours, and I invite any of you, if you want to join me, I can tell you which flight I'm on. I did not check the flights today, the prices. I bought it 2 weeks ago. If it's still a decent price, I'd love to travel with any one of you or all of you to join me Wednesday at the Oihel. So you can let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyways, hope you all had an easy fast. And yeah, if I don't see you before, I guess we'll see you at Shabbos.
Okay.
Shabbat.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
It's great.
Really good.
Really good.
We'll
Take
see
care.
you. Good
All the
night.
best.
Good night.
All right.